It's been a while since Chevrolet announced its second official recall for all 2017 through some 2019 Chevrolet Bolt EVs to address an issue with the battery pack potentially catching fire. And while we've covered this a fair amount on the channel, and we don't want you to think that that's all we're focusing on, a lot of you have reached out with questions, asking us stuff that we are either unable or not able to give you information on. So today I thought I would give you a bit of an update onto our own personal staff car fleet and also discuss some of the questions that you've had. First off, I want to talk about our own vehicles. Now, my 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV Artemis, that's the car I'm sitting in right now, has been rock solid in its reliability over the time we've owned it. However, because I live in rural Oregon, halfway up a hill, and because my wife and I drive a lot because we have to get into town and back again, our Bolt EVs are no longer as practical as they once were for getting to and from work. That's because GM is asking people to use Hilltop Reserve mode, which of course restricts the maximum state of charge your car can get, and also not to drive the car below an indicated 70 miles of remaining range, which is just over 120 kilometers or thereabouts. And that means that we're only using about probably 60% of the car's theoretical maximum range, which is meaning that our Bolts have overnight become about 140 miles capable cars, which is not enough for a lot of people. Now, we're lucky, we live in the country and we can park a fair distance away from our house. I'm actually parked on my driveway. My garage where the car charges is a long way away. But a lot of people aren't in that situation, and we'll come to that in a second. But for us, my wife and I both decided that having given General Motors a chance to fix our battery using software and then to learn that the battery issue was still persistent, that we'd frankly rather have a new battery in our car. And if GM is not prepared to give everybody who has a Bolt EV a new battery, then, well, we are among a number of people who are requesting buybacks or MSRP swaps. The difference being that the MSRP swap allows you to get into another comparable vehicle, like a newer 2020 or newer Bolt that doesn't have the same battery pack in, or for you to get a buyback from GM in which they cut you a check for the value of your car, minus any money that's still outstanding on it from leasing or purchase payments, and then you're at liberty to go and get what other car you want. We don't want to go back to an internal combustion engine vehicle, and so we're hoping that GM will consider either an MSRP swap or a buyback. And it's really because the Bolt EVs that we use do long distance trips. You know, we drive across country in our cars, and to have a car that is physically restricted in its real-world range right now, well, it's going to be tough. Winter and I have been planning a trip down to the San Francisco Bay Area to pick up something that he has to pick up from the Bay Area. And while it's still technically possible for us to make that long-distance trip in this car, while adhering to GM's current recommendations, not going above 90% state of charge and not going below 70 miles of remaining range, the amount of time that we'll take on the road is significantly increased. Similarly, my wife, hopefully in September, will be going back to working at the office that she hasn't been at for more than a year and a half because of COVID. And if she does go back to working in person, she's going to be doing 50 miles a day of round trips to and from work. And so that's the reason we chose the path we've chosen. Whether we will get a buyback offer or not, I don't know. We're not getting any special treatment because of the channel, but just one of a number of people who's requesting a buyback. Which brings me to a lot of the questions that people have been sending our way. Why is GM ignoring us? Why is GM not paying attention? And without making excuses to GM, because frankly, I am personally, without my journalist hat on, frustrated as every other Bolt EV owner is about this situation, I think it's important and pertinent to remember here that there are probably going to be tens of thousands of Bolt EV owners who are all feeling a similar way about their car and all reaching out to the Bolt EV concierge line. If it's any consolation, I've found the My Chevy concierge service to be pretty decent most of the time, and I followed the number that's in the Chevrolet app that I use to interact with my Bolt EV and its telematics. It's My Chevy, I think it's 1833 My Chevy. I'll check the number and leave it in the show notes below. You have to go through option 1. The phone tree options that it gives you are to press 1 if your car is involved in a current recall pertaining to the battery recall. If you press 1, you'll get to talk to an EV concierge specialist, and then you can talk to them about what you want to do. I would advise at this point that you don't kind of rail against them or threaten legal action or do anything else like that, because that's going to result in you getting hung up on, but it's also going to make things difficult for you in the future. Whereas being polite and understanding that the person you're talking to is not the person who caused the problem in the first place, you're going to get on far better. As my mum used to say, you catch more flies with nice things than nasty things like vinegar. So, to some of the other questions that you've been sending our way, specifically, how do I know if my car is involved in the recall? A lot of you have been sending us pictures of your VIN numbers, which is very sweet that you think that we can tell you whether your car is affected or not, but we're not able to. We don't have a VIN database, we can't tell you if your car is affected or not, and frankly, you should be reaching out to your relevant car maker in whichever market you happen to be to see if the recall is actually in effect or not. We've heard from a lot of Opel owners who say that Opel Europe doesn't seem to know anything about the recall. Do we know if their battery is affected or not? One person even snapped a photograph of their battery pack and sent it to us. But again, we can't tell. We don't have that information. And frankly, even if we did, then it would put us in a legal position, a not very nice legal position, if we were to tell you that your car was fine when it wasn't, or vice versa. Some of you also want to know if we have any special contacts at GM. We had one person reach out and said, hey, do you know somebody that I can reach out to? All of our contacts at GM are press relations people. They're not people who are going to be able to solve any problems. And frankly, we haven't reached out to those people over this matter other than to get official statements. Anything that is relating or pertaining to a customer vehicle needs to go through the same process, which is obviously the customer service line. And unfortunately, we're all in the same boat there. The other thing that people want to know is, well, what's the law like in my area? Now, in the US, we have 50 states and we also have overseas territories, and every one of them has slightly different laws as to what is applicable when it comes to lemon laws, buybacks, and MSRP swaps. The advice I would give you right now is to look in your local legislature to see if you can figure out what the lemon law is in your area, and basically do your research before you ring up the EV concierge line if you do want that battery pack. You want to request a battery pack swap, or you want to request an MSRP swap or a buyback. We can't tell you directly what each state does. For example, Winter, who is currently going through a buyback request on his car, has been told that he has to deal with somebody in the state of California because that's where his car was originally purchased. That was not what he was previously told by the main specialists that he talked to. So it can also depend on which person you speak to on the EV concierge line as to what happens next. Now, I've spoken to several people on the EV concierge line. The first time I called, I spoke to someone who didn't think that MSRP swaps was possible. Then they spoke to their manager, and then they come back and they were like, oh yeah, it's the same process as a buyback. So your experience may and will vary. Bear in mind that GM has likely brought on additional staff to deal with this, and in the hurried state of affairs, not everybody is going to have the same amount of knowledge in the car. I think GM personally has handled this not great, but I also think that ultimately everyone will get dealt with, because if they don't, then bad things lie ahead for the company, and I'm pretty confident that any large automaker would not want that to happen. Some of you have also been reaching out about the Bolt EUV and whether that's a good replacement option for you if you want to stay with Chevrolet, you want to stay with the GM EV. And frankly, I can't tell you because we haven't driven one yet. We're trying to get hold of one as a press car, but when we do, we will of course produce a video and we will share it on the channel. In the interim, though, I would give you some pretty simple advice about all of this, and that is keep a record. Make sure that you note down who you talk to and when you talk to them. Don't bug GM or other companies. Don't be that greasy, or that squeaky wheel, rather. Be sensible about the amount of time that you leave between your phone calls. Don't be calling every day, except that it's going to take a while for you to get a call back. To give you an example, we spoke to GM this time last week about our initiation of a buyback or an MSRP swap, and we heard yesterday that they're in the process of trying to finalise things. Today, we got an email saying, please provide all of the documentation that you have for both of your cars. They want the original bill of sale. They want your copy of your title if you have it. They want a picture of your odometer. They want to make sure you've got all the finance agreements, and all of that can take a while to get together. So my advice here would be, if you are serious about, pursuing an MSRP swap or a buyback, then make sure you start the process and be proactive and get all of that process going by getting all of that data in advance. Make sure that you've got your buyback statement, your initial bill of sale. Make sure that you've got a photograph of your odometer that is up to date. Make sure that if you have any finance packages or lease packages, you've got all of the information to hand for that. And of course, that will speed up the process. We are in the process of making sure we've got all that information, and we don't have it yet. So we'll be sending that down the line in the future. Now, I know that this video has been more personal than we normally would make it because, frankly, this is a personal situation. The Bolt EV is a car that we drive daily. My partner and I both own a Bolt EV. We were able to get Bolt EVs for far less than a lot of other cars on the market at the time, and that's one of the reasons why we went for them. Plus, we liked the car's design, we liked how it drove, we liked its feel. We're certainly distrustful of any LG Energy supplied battery pack in any car right now, but given the new Bolt EV and Bolt EUV seem to have a different cell chemistry, even cell chemistry, it's late in the day, we're okay right now with considering those as replacements for our cars. Of course, it's complicated by the fact that we have two cars that we're reservation holders for, the Ford F-150 Lightning and also the Aptera, which I don't think I'm going to get anytime soon. I'm sure other Aptera owners are feeling the same way. It's probably going to be a couple of years down the line before we get that, but time will tell. Anyway, if you've got any tips and tricks that you want to leave others in the comments below, please do so. But remember to be civil, remember to be kind, and please, for goodness sake, don't leave anything that's legally questionable or anything else, and make sure that you make it clear that it's your opinion, not your professional advice, because I'm doubting that most of you watching this are actually lawyers. We certainly aren't, so anything I've said in this video, take that at your own face value. Don't come crying to me if I've said something that you've then done that's caused things to get worse. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also our other two channels, which is Transport Evolved Take 2 and Transport Evolved Shorts. Also, thanks ever so much to the folks on my right for supporting the channel. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. Thanks also to our $15 to $49 Patreons. They are Andrew Martin, Guido Drahoa, Brophy Wolf, Anonymous Freak, Regine Fallows, Carl Hodgson, Gordon C, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, Denny Hyde, Sean Ueda, and Tesla in the Gong. And of course, our absolute gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. They are the amazing team that is John Lyons, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerbeck, Will Graylin, and Ian. If you'd like to support the channel, there will be links below to Patreon, Bitcoin, and Ko-fi. Don't forget that you can buy some amazing Transport Evolved swag at our Redbubble store. And I'll be back soon with more great content. Until then, thanks for joining me. and keep evolving.